Hello, and welcome to In Conversation With. This is a series of discussions with people who hold advanced degrees in the life sciences about their careers and career journeys. My name is Chris Heinen. I am a professor of medicine at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine and the director of postdoctoral affairs here at UConn Health. Hey, Chandrima.
Hi, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Chandrima Majumdar, and I'm a postdoc at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee, from where this podcast originated. We're really excited to continue our series of conversations about the vast array of careers that are available for grad students and postdocs in the life sciences.
So, we are delighted today to welcome our guest, Dr. Carter Palmer, who is the co-founder and CEO of Third Element Bio. Welcome, Carter.
Hi, how's it
So
going?
great. So thanks for joining us. Why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about what Third Element Bio is?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you both so much for having me on. It's an awesome pleasure. I'm really excited to chat with you guys today. Um, Third Element Bio is a San Diego-based biotech startup. We're working to rejuvenate the human brain, and we're starting with rejuvenating its immune system. So really what we do is we used advanced analysis of human brain tissue to identify novel targets that regulate disease states, and we then go ahead and develop therapeutics that specifically target these key regulators. So broadly, we're trying to push the brain back to a healthy state.
So why don't you kind of give us a little of the history then? So how did this whole thing kind of originate?
Yeah, of course, I'd be more than happy to. There's a couple different levels to that, and I think we'll get
Yeah.
into many of those different levels. But I think the root core of this is the co-founders of Third Element were all in the same lab together, and we were investigating how the human brain ages and how that occurs in general aging and how that occurs in neurodegeneration. And as we started to investigate this, we started to identify novel targets that we thought could potentially be drugged. And so as we kept pushing that forward, we got this idea, okay, maybe we can really go ahead and kick this into a company. And that's sort of the start of Third Element Bio.
Okay.
So what were like the steps that you took to, go from an idea to conceptualizing a company and then uh, actually building it?
Yeah, of course. I think you can go maybe two different ways with this of really practical steps or instead more existential. So maybe I'll take a step back and say really high level, what were the things that were
Mhm.
really important for us in just starting a company? I think the first one, and maybe this seems really simple, is what's your idea, right? And while that sounds really simple, I think it's actually, there's a lot of layers to making sure you have an idea that really can be the foundation of a functional biotech company. But at its base, that's saying what problem is out there and how am I going to solve it, right?
Mhm.
Largely in biotech, that comes down to one of two things, either a novel disease hypothesis. So I think this is driving a disease and we're going to approach it in a new way, or it's a new therapeutic modality breakthrough, right? It's some
Mhm.
new way to say, okay, I can make CAR T better, or I can make small molecules better. So for us, it was more of a disease hypothesis. We have novel ways of approaching how disease progresses and novel ways of trying to cure it. So that sort of idea is number one. Uh,
Yeah.
I think team is number two, and I think we'll probably discuss team more as this conversation goes on, but you really are looking for other people who are committed and excited about what you're doing and bringing them in. If we're talking primarily about commercializing technology directly out of academia, which I think makes sense for the listener population here, uh, you want both a technical expert, which a lot of those of us who did a PhD or a postdoc would be, but you also want someone who's excited to transition out of that and really to the business side, which is a very different career path and a very different day-to-day job. So if you have this great idea, you have a team together, you really do need data at this point. That's just a sort of situation that we're in within the funding environment in biotech right now. If we were back in 2020, 2021, I think some companies were getting founded purely based off ideas. But right now, you really need some data to go ahead and get traction. So you get that idea, you get that team, you get some data supporting your hypothesis, the more the better. And then really the fourth one that I think is really important is a plan, right? And This goes more back to the business side. I think we're probably technical founders are really good at laying out the plan for the experiments, but much more this plan of what does the business side look like? How much money do you need to get to really key milestones, and how will those milestones be inflection points for your potential investors? That plan matters a lot. So I'd say those are really the four key steps in building a startup biotech. And then once you have those four, you can go get the fifth key step, which is actually money to do all of this and to execute on what you're planning.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack in what you just said. So I'll
Yeah.
go back to the beginning. The first question is just from your mindset when this was happening, were you of the mindset of, oh, we've stumbled across something interesting, maybe there's the potential for this to turn into a company, or were you kind of always had in the back of your mind that that might be something you'd like to do and you were just sort of waiting for the right opportunity?
Yeah. Um, it's very much the second for me. And maybe
The
this goes
second.
back to where this first originated. And I think it's hard to talk about the origin of Third Element Bio without first talking about the origin of Vaxxas technology. So
Okay.
I studied biomedical engineering and tissue engineering, biomaterials science in my undergrad research, and ended up being pulled into a company called Vaxxas Technologies that was founded by an amazing team of four entrepreneurs originally. And the technology came out of a lab that I was working in as an undergrad. It wasn't my technology, but it was tangential, and I was able to help them sort of get that off the ground and get that running. So I spent 4 years at Vaxxas, very tumultuous. There were many, many high highs that were great and some pretty low lows, and we were going through this challenge of really starting a company. And I got to see how those founders navigated that process. And Vaxxas has done great today and has been quite successful. So, really seeing those founders gave me this idea that, okay, this is something I actually could do. And I got really excited about potentially doing it. So, I knew going into grad school that that was something in the back of my mind. It wasn't my primary goal, right? Like, okay, I need to do science that will 100% lead to a company. I was still there to learn and to ask really pure scientific questions, but the fact that it sort of came along naturally was really great to me.
I see. And then you mentioned that you need an idea and then you need some data. And so the data, is that something that is still coming over from the academic side, or this is now once you've sort of separated away and are now designating yourself as a company?
hmm Yeah, I mean it depends, right?
Depends.
And data can come from a lot of different places, and there's companies founded on really broad amounts of data, right? So I think maybe the most classical thing is okay, you do your PhD or your postdoc, you collect this beautiful data package, you publish this great paper, and that implicates either a new disease hypothesis or a new therapeutic modality, right? And you go ahead and commercialize based off that data package.
Okay.
We weren't quite in that situation, so we didn't collect all of that data in our academic setting. So now we're sort of saying we had really nice preliminary data in academics, and actually a lot of this data came from other groups, which has been great. So we're sort of pulling and mining data from other groups that are pointing at this same disease hypothesis, the same indication, without
Okay.
really implicating it explicitly. Right.
Okay.
And we can pull that into a package. And then now as a company, yeah, we're going ahead and really pushing forward on does
Okay.
our drug do what we want it to do and collecting that data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned when you were talking about the foundation of Third Element Bio is in addition to the idea and the data, you also need to do fundraising and like think about your business plan and things like that. Those aren't things that we typically learn in grad school. So I guess how did you go about building those skills and figuring out what you need to do to like make that package to fundraise?
Yeah. That's a great question. And no, we most definitely do not learn about that in grad school. At least we didn't at UCSD. But um, I think a lot of that learning process is by talking to people, of course. I think this is
Mhm.
easy to say, but very, very important to do. So you need to get out of lab and start making that network, which is great. Um, at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of similarities between late stage academic trainee careers, so end of PhDs or end of postdocs, and sort of this first stage of starting a company. Again, you're taking together this data and this team and this idea and sort of packaging it and saying, I'm going to be able to do something that's truly novel or unique or distinct. right? And so if you're going the academic path and becoming a professor, you're sort of packaging that into hopefully your first grant applications, which again is broadly saying, here's a great team, here's a great idea, here's data to support why I'm going to be able to execute on this, and here's my plan to get there, right? It's just the end goal is a little bit different. In academia, that end goal is to make a scientific discovery, to do something entirely novel. And in drug development, therapeutic development, there's actually this, I guess, pressure on you need to make something that's profitable, right? So that end goal is saying there's financial viability in this path, whereas in academia, it could be we don't necessarily know that financial profit at this point. We're just discovering and learning, which is great. But I think that a lot of those uh, approaches really do align across the two.
So in
Oh,
academia, if we're fundraising, we we know where to go. We know who we're writing to, right? There's usually a couple main places that we go for funding. But in something like this, how do you learn about where are the sources for you to get some of this initial funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely think you have far more diverse potential sources
Yeah.
in this setting than you do in academia. In terms of learning about it, just what's out there, honestly, you can Google, you can start looking up how do these early stage companies go make their money. And again, you'll talk to other people who have done it. Really, for early stage companies, I think there are three primary tranches of funding that you can push, although there's quite a few others. One is actually government funding. So just
Mm,
like you can get government funding for your academic lab, you can get funding for early stage commercialization. And that's a type of grant called SBIRs, or Small Business Innovative Research Grants. These are supported by the government to basically fund exactly the space where I'm in right now, where you've had an academic technology, you've made a discovery, you're really interested in it, you have a great team, but you're maybe not ready to get venture investment just yet, right? They want to see more of your data de-risked, right? So
mm,
these SBIRs can come in, and you're writing these grants very similarly to academic grants in some ways. But again, there's just a little more of this commercialization uh, tinge to it, right? And you can go and you can find examples of these SBIRs, and it doesn't take too much to get your first SBIR in the door. So that's been an amazing support for us. I guess as a little plug, if you're interested in SBIRs or you're fully supportive of them, call your senator right now. They haven't been authorized. They've lapsed since last October. It's a really important aspect of early stage innovation in this country. And reauthorization for SBIRs is really quite important. But
yeah,
typically, when everything's running smoothly, SBIRs are an amazing first step to get that first 300,000 to $3 million in the door to really get your company up and running.
yeah,
Then there's a second tranche, which is angels. So these are going to be people who are really interested in your technology, people who are interested in your potential modality or indication, who want to see Alzheimer's eradicated, who want a cure for cancer out there, and they like what you're doing and how you're approaching it. They can go ahead and invest in your company. And those will help sort of move forward. And then, of course, there's your sort of classical venture capitalist or institutional investors. And they're usually going to come in with a little bit more money, a little bit more muscle behind them, do quite a bit to accelerate your progress. But really early on, you're probably looking more at those angel and really early investors, and then grants from across the board, be that SBIRs or others.
yeah, yeah.
so how do you go about finding, angel investors and networking with strategically with people that will help you build your company?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's networking strategically. So not just broad networking, but really trying to be intentional about who you're talking to. I think that's a lot different than a lot of academic settings often, right? Where it's sort of head down, get your data. It's really important to get out there. So the approach to that can be different for different people, but I think that generally it's find people who are interested in your space and start asking who they know who's also interested in that space. Start to spread out and see that. You can, of course, look at people who have exited companies within your space, right? These are people who are going to have lots and lots of knowledge on your technology or your area and might be really interested in sort of uh, forwarding along their success to other entrepreneurs within the space as well. And a lot of these people do congregate together. So a lot of times you'll see them at pitch competitions or different networking events for that space in particular. So those are also really good first steps. I really encourage people as you're starting a company just to go out and get that kind of scrappy money. So sometimes that's the $5,000 or $10,000 award here or $50,000 award for a pitch competition. You got to enter yourself into these. And almost all of these different competitions have multiple tiers of progression, right? So by the time you're one of the last three people up on stage, you've probably pitched to many of these people three, four, five times, and that's how you really start to make those connections with them. And then, of course, they know other people who are interested in the space. So a lot of it's just getting out there, putting your name out there, getting your information, your pitch deck out there as much as possible.
Are there resources at the university where you're a student or a postdoc that help with this transition at all?
Yeah, I think that's going to be wildly variable
Yeah.
based on university. And so I think it's really hard for me to comment on what that's like broadly.
Okay.
Vaxis Technologies, where I was at, the founders were coming out of Harvard. The technology was coming out of Tufts. Both of those schools were working quite hard to push commercialization as an aspect of what they did. So there were quite a few resources there. And I think really often that's your best first step. We saw the same thing at UCSD. There was a big push at UCSD, both from the Sullivan Center of Entrepreneurship associated with the Rady Business School, as well as sort of engineering school and other support systems where you can get in and do what's often called accelerator programs. So these are like, okay, you think you have an idea that's maybe worth founding a company on, and maybe you haven't incorporated yet, maybe you have, you're just starting to get there. Let's start flushing out your idea, right? Is there a
Mhm.
real business path? Do we have advisors who could help you here? What should your first pitch deck look like, and what should be included in it? Almost all of these are free. Honestly, I wouldn't I would suggest most people try not to pay for these accelerator programs unless there's capital that comes with them. If you give away 5% of your company and they actually invest $250,000 in your company, that's great. But a lot of these are free. And a lot of these are really great, right? One that I think does deserve a shout out is Nucleate. So that's a student-run organization that I know is really, really broad across America and now globally, which is another fantastic one, totally free and a really great educational resource. So between Nucleate and school-based ones, I think that's a really good first segue into those. And then we've seen a lot of the mentors and supporters that we got from those academic institution accelerator programs actually stick with us and really help us drive forward at this point.
Okay.
So like in addition to these programs, did you feel like you needed to take any sort of business classes at the business school at UCSD, or like would you recommend people do something like that if they want to get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it depends. I think there's a lot to be learned from an MBA. Uh, and it's certainly a very different world when you're focusing in the business side versus the academic side. I think that there's a potential that I might have moved more quickly if I had an MBA under my belt when I first started. But at the same time, I think it's definitely feasible to do this as a academic or as a technological founder without that MBA background. One thing that we thought was really helpful, and this has happened quite a bit, I think, is that a lot of those early accelerator programs have paired us with people with an MBA background, right? And so we're able to learn and talk to these people and as much as we can sort of filter information from them to help drive our path forward. And one of our really early on supporters actually was just finishing her MBA and really helped us get off the ground and get running. So while I think it could be beneficial, and there's certainly a number of classes in an MBA that are beneficial, I don't think it's necessary to do so.
Gotcha. And another thing that you mentioned was they use accelerator programs. They pair you up with people with MBAs or advisors. Was there were there other intentional things that you did to build your network of mentors that would help you get to where you are?
Yeah, certainly. And as you start a company, you'll learn that your academic advisors. So you'll basically have a scientific advisory board, which are partially academic, partially drug development backgrounds, and then an actual board. And those advisors are very, very key, right? And you want to develop both of those boards very intentionally. And so that has been a very intentional path of, okay, what indications are we focused on? Okay, we need a scientific advisor who knows that indication inside and out, right? What modality are we using? Like, what type of drug are we making? We need a scientific advisor who knows that modality inside and out.
Mhm.
And so these are things that we identified as key needs and then actually went and seeked out these people, right? Who's done this the best, the most recently, quite well, and you go to them and you tell them your story, right? And I think we've found that with a good idea and a good team, there have been a lot of people really willing to help us and to support us. And we've been quite lucky in that regard.
So are these people in academia or in business already? I mean, where are they coming from?
All over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the broader that advisory team is, the better off you're going to be. So
Okay.
we have one advisor who's like a very, very strong business and finance background,
Okay.
not a scientist by training at all. We have one who recently left academia to start their own company, but was a long-term academic, right, running their own lab for a significant period of time. We have two amazing advisors who are quintessential drug developers through and through, right? Have spent the significant portion of their career simply developing drugs and doing it as best as possible. So these are broad and from different backgrounds, certainly.
And they agree then to spend some set amount of time thinking about your problem and talking with you guys
Yep.
in terms of their commitment, I guess, is what I'm curious about this advisory board.
Exactly. So you'll set this up differently depending on who it is,
Uh,
and it is interesting. There's a little bit of a game to it, right? So you're going
Okay.
to have advisors who are very hands-on and really supportive. Those advisors are amazing, right? And we have a couple of those who we'll meet with more than quarterly at this point. So every month or two, we'll meet with them, we'll share our data with them. They'll give us really, really deep insight and really be involved. Sometimes you get bigger name advisors who can be really important in actually obtaining fundraising, right? People are like, oh, this guy is number one in this field, or this
Yeah.
woman's amazing. She developed X drug. Um, and sometimes they'll basically say, we want a little bit of equity and you can slap our name on there and maybe we'll talk to you once a year.
Okay.
So sometimes you do that, if need be, but
Yeah,
that's sort of a decision that you make as a team.
I see. Yeah.
Awesome. So we talked a lot about how you went about setting this up. Can you tell us about what your day-to-day looks like now? Like, what is the life of an entrepreneur on a, weekly basis?
Yeah, of course. Very happy to comment on that. So I think the common trope is that you wear a lot of hats. And
Mhm.
to be fair, I think that common trope is very accurate. So we're a three-person team right now. So there's three of us full time. I'm unbelievably lucky that my other two co-founders are exceedingly gifted technically. So I do almost no scientific management on that front, right? They know how to do the experiments they're doing. They know how to do it better than I do. Um, so really that's not my primary focus, which is kind of interesting, but really great. So basically the three of us can come together and steer where the science goes, but no micromanaging on that front. I think steering is really the number one thing that I try to do. So we're going out, we're talking to our advisors, we're talking to investors. How can we move this company forward along our trajectory, along our visionary path, in a way that means we'll continue to get funding and we'll continue to hit really important deadlines. So that's
Mm.
really one important aspect. Working with investment actually takes quite a bit of time. So building that network quite intentionally, as you talked about, is very important. Figuring out what investors want to see and then incorporating that into your pitches, your executive summaries, your email diligence, making sure the data room is maintained, dealing with diligence from those investors. So investors will start to pick at, hey, how well do you know this or that? And they'll come back with quite a bit of questions surrounding that. So making sure you're prepared for all that and then actually executing on it is quite a bit. And then, of course, there's the day-to-day of keeping a company up and running, right? So it's tax season. So getting all of our financials in order
Uh,
and dealing with taxes and making sure payroll's running and making sure the grants that we do have are well spent and we're in accordance with everything tied in there. So that's really what my day-to-day looks like, but it's all over the place on any given day. And then when I'm lucky,
Sure.
I get to talk to brilliant people like you two.
So, all right. So, you may have touched on this in some of your previous answers already, but that transition, what were some of the biggest challenges that kind of had you a little stressed as you were transitioning, either problems you weren't expecting or things that you were fully expecting, but were still just very difficult to kind of deal with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that was both freeing and exciting and also a little bit stressful is that academia is often so rigid and structured. And you know that at the end of the day, you have this massive, massive academic institution behind you
Mm.
that's generally supporting what you're doing, right? And there's generally someone you can call, and sometimes there's way too many people that you have to go through to get any single thing done. But someone's worrying about payroll and someone's worrying about making sure everything's going well and making sure that the lab's set up and all of that's done, right? And so that transition out where sort of everything lands on you was definitely an interesting transition. But again, everything can be really quick when there's only three people at a company, right? You know exactly
Yeah.
who's doing what, you know exactly who to talk to. If it needs to be solved, someone solves that problem really quickly. So that's great. I also think, again, the networking was a big change, and professional networking and academic networking are a little bit different. And so, really, that transition into understanding professional networking and then really starting to embrace it was certainly a change as well.
Yeah. Was there a process at the beginning where the three of you were overlapping in your roles to some extent, or having to figure out on the fly, all right, who's gonna take care of this challenge today? Or was it something that you guys sat down at the beginning and you drew up a really good structure of, all right, this is your role, this is my role, this is your role?
No, I think that's nearly impossible for first-time founders to do.
Yeah.
Even the best planners are probably going to miss something that's really important. So we meet every week and say, okay, where are we at? Are there any
Yeah.
new problems? Who does that land under?
Okay.
And figure it out as we go. But that's constant communication to make sure that we know who's taking what role. And we've actually worked really, really hard on making sure that there is a point person for everything that needs to get done. I think that's really important. There's not sort of a amorphous board where we throw problems at. If there's a problem that comes up, it's sort of immediately like, all right, who needs to take care of this?
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
So what is something that you absolutely love about your role and your path?
Yeah. Uh, One of the things I love the most is the team that I get to work with. I absolutely love my two co-founders and it's a fantastic opportunity to work with them. I Again, if we're going back to common tropes, I think people talk about if you're going to start a company, start it with people who are smarter than you. I've been really lucky to do that. And so every day I'm amazed at what they can accomplish and how quickly we're moving and the progress we're making. So that's really fantastic. I also really love at the end of the day the opportunity to do something different.
Mm.
Our lead program is going after a target in neurodegeneration that nobody's went after before. We think it's different. We think it's new. We think it's novel. We think it's a little bit higher risk, right? And right off the bat, I don't think I'd be able to work on a project like this at Big Pharma or at other companies. So I really do think that's the key aspect of entrepreneurship is find something you want to develop, find something you want to see, make it all the way through, and then really go and charge at that. So I love that aspect too.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And you can like actually have a direct impact on people's lives, which is
That's
amazing.
the goal.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, what are some things that are not so great about being an entrepreneur?
Um, Again, it's easy to say, but I think it honestly is true. When you're starting out, you're short on money. And having to solve the money problem is a headache that, again, I think most academics feel as well. I think that's something that you often feel in science is that you have experiments that you want to do, you want to be able to go faster, you want to be able to see results sooner. And at really early stage startups, you typically don't have enough money to move at that speed. So that's something that certainly keeps me up at night and certainly keeps me thinking, but we're getting there. We're getting better. So
Well, how do you manage that just in terms of the basics? Like where are we working? What's our space? How and what are we paying ourselves with? I mean, how are those decisions kind of made, generally speaking?
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's like any company, right? You're gonna have some amount of money, you're gonna have a budget, and then you're gonna have to decide where that budget goes.
Hmm.
It is good. Those SBIRs that I talked about earlier, they require you to pre-budget. So that's a really good first step to have those
Okay.
discussions and say, like, okay, we're going to get this much money for materials, we're going to get this much money for overhead, this much money for salary. Um, and you
Hmm.
actually need to sort of sit down and at least roughly sketch out what that's going to be. There's some flex on the SBIR side. But that's something that's understandable. One thing that's interesting about the startup world is that all of those budgets change all the time, right? As I said, you kind of got to be out there scrapping, getting different awards. So, okay, oh, $50,000 came in. What are we putting this towards, right? Is this going to give ourselves a little bonus or is this going to go to another animal
Yeah.
experiment? Often we're deciding it's another animal experiment right now. So those are conversations that are ongoing, and that's something that's really fluid at this really early stage. Once you get into the institutional investor stage, it usually clarifies quite a bit. Usually you're going to them asking for, I need X dollars to do exactly this. And you're really digging into exactly what that is, and they're going to want to see what your
Okay.
budget is. How much are you paying yourself? Who else are you hiring? What will these experiments cost? That's already sort of outlined. So once you have that nice institutional investment, that does clarify quite a bit.
So, I mean, it does sound like at least at the very beginning, there's sort of a thrill ride slash terror trip that you have to have the stomach for, right?
Yeah, you got it. 100%. You're on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
better like roller coasters.
Okay, very good. Very good. So you had talked about your early experience in this startup company, so you got to see a little bit of it and probably learned an awful lot from that experience. But for the grad student or postdoc who's listening that hasn't had that experience yet, but is very much thinking these ways, what would you say, looking back, are some of the things that you did develop in your academic training that are sort of transferable that you find yourself kind of calling back on now, even if it wasn't intended, for that purpose back when you were learning and training and
Yeah,
developing?
no, 100%. I think that PhDs and academic training in general are really great in a lot of ways. And I think this harkens back to the whole point of this podcast that you guys are running and doing so great with is that the training sets you up for a number of different careers, right? This isn't training for just one career. If you go get your PhD, you can really broadly apply that. And that's because there are these core sets of abilities that you gain during a PhD. I think one of the biggest ones, especially for us, is perseverance. I don't really know anybody who got a PhD and walk in and say, yeah, the first experiment that I did worked, and every experiment that I did through the end worked, and that was it, right? It was great. I published a couple papers and left, right? Most people I know spent 6 months with nothing working, or a year where I couldn't get this assay to work before I had to pivot. And that perseverance, that willingness to commit yourself to a singular objective is, I think, really, really valuable in building and developing a company. So I think that's quite important. The understanding that this is a lengthy process is also really important. When you start a company, that's something that you're going to be with for ideally a very long period of time, at the very least 5 to 10 years, right? And so that's that same mindset at the start of a PhD. We're like, okay, I'm completely committed to this. I know it's going to be a while before this is finished, and I know that I need to sort of bite off small chunks that I can take down, right? Before I get to that really big goal. So I think that those two things in particular have been really, really beneficial to us.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. So what does success look like? I mean, where are you in 10 years if everything worked the way you hope and dream?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, success for me, and this has really been the driver, is we have a therapeutic that works,
Okay.
right? It's really quite simple in that sense, and everything else will come from that.
Yeah.
If the therapeutic works, there's going to be value behind it, and more importantly than that, to me, we're going to be helping people who have Alzheimer's disease or helping people with other neurodegenerative disorders live a better, healthier, more full life. So that's really success on that front. And I think 10 years is kind of the timeline where we should be able to start to see in humans if it does work.
Yeah, that's great.
That's an incredible goal to like move towards. I kind of want to, have you reflect back a little bit. And if you had some sort of way to meet your younger self and you could tell him something about how your career would play out, what would you like to tell him?
It's a great question. It's hard right now because I feel like I'm only a year and a half into my full career, right? I finished my postdoc about that long ago. So I feel like I almost turned that question into I would love future Carter to come in here 10, 15 years down the road and say, yeah, keep at it. It worked out. Or think about this other target, something along those lines. But uh, without a doubt, I think that biotech is changing. I think drug development is changing. It's all changing quite rapidly right now. There's a lot of different things that are moving. And so I think that if I were to tell myself 10 years ago what to do, it's just to continue driving forward at something you're passionate about and know that you're going to have to make things happen. Right.
Mhm.
I think very rarely right now things naturally occur. Things just tend like sort of serendipitously come to you. I think there's really a need for drive to make things happen. And so encouraging my younger self to keep doing that and stay committed would be one of my primary messages.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's an incredible message for like our listeners too. Like you just need to drive forward and make things happen.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Carter, for joining us today. This has been really interesting. And just to our listeners, if you want to continue the conversation, you can visit the ASBMB Active site. It's the series of discussion threads for the ASBMB, and we have one dedicated to this podcast where you can ask follow-up questions that we can get to our guests. You can suggest topics for future episodes. Whatever you'd like to share with us, we'd be happy to read it. So thanks again, everybody. Chandrima, great to see you again. And
Mhm.
be well, everyone.
Thank you so much.